Good morning. I'm representing my family down here. My name is Kevin Jolly. We've been vacationing down here for years. We are property owners down here for the last 6 or 7 years. My parents, my family, my brother's family, extended family, all come down here. And the reason we came after Gulf Shores, Panama City, Destin, is precisely because of St. George Island the way it is. You drive into this county, and yes, you have growth, you have dilapidated buildings, you have funky history. It's incredible. And you drive across the bridge and you see the trees, you see the crosses, you see the welcome to St. George Island, and you see the open ground, and yes, you see some funky businesses. It's perfect. I simply want to say this. The restrictions that are in place for the height, no RVs, think on it, because the character, when I travel to Plymouth, Massachusetts, or we're from Kentucky, and we travel all over because of our business, our farming, everyone knows of St. George Island. And it's got a great brand, and that brand is how it is, because of how it is. Because it's not 30-story high-rises.
Right.
Keep it the way it is. I support the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, comment. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? There being no further public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'd like to just follow up and clarify a couple of points. You have really 3 options. You can use the original 2100, you can adopt a moratorium area that's in yellow, or you could extend the yellow to be 3rd Street to 3rd Street. So that's your threshold question if you decide to adopt a moratorium. That's clearly a policy call on your part. I wanted to point out, one of the speakers said that you had...
Just one moment. Just to make sure we're clear, when he says extend the yellow already goes from 3rd Street to 3rd Street. He's referring
Bring it down.
to 4th Street to 4th Street, or maybe coming down.
Down, thank you. Got that, Michael?
I'm sorry.
Got it?
I did not hear that.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking about bringing it down south so you capture the lots, and we're not doing a full 2,100 foot radius.
Okay.
Just making it basically a larger rectangle to the south. I mean, that is your policy call that you can make. One of the issues that I heard addressed, and I just wanted to follow up, that you have existing regulations, and that's absolutely correct. You have existing regulations on the books. But what communities do with overlay districts, they impose an opportunity. Somebody mentioned a brand. It makes that community or that gateway something that's unique to St. George Island. So when you go over the bridge, you recognize this is unique. This isn't what I call anywhere USA. So you can have an architectural theme, you can dictate materials on the exterior of buildings, you can have new regulations regarding landscaping and parking, landscape buffers, the amount of glass that you want on a building, where the parking is, all that gets into play because you're basically saying we want to craft and protect a character of what you see on that first impression. You don't have those regs in place now. So to the extent that you want to have that type of an overlay where you protect what you've got and establish the brand with a common theme, maybe you tie it into a lighthouse, add additional vegetation requirements. Those are all things that will shake out if you adopt a moratorium and start the process of doing that overlay. I think in the city of Alachua, one of the things they did was a certain type of street light, so that they had a character for their street lights. They literally went to that type of detail. So that's all on the plate for you. And it is a pure policy call for y'all. I can defend this, I believe, in circuit court if litigation is brought to challenge it. Additional architectural regulations do not create an inordinate burden, so you're not going to have a legitimate Bert Harris claim. Additional architectural guidelines do not take away all use, so you don't have a takings here. What you're doing, what I've seen in most communities that do this, they create a brand that increases the property value, not decrease it. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
If the board has no other questions, then my recommendation is you close the LPA meeting and then open up your public meeting, at which you will then be in a procedural position to do two things. One is to receive further public comment if there's someone that didn't speak before that wants to speak now, and not just keep repeating themselves, obviously, as the chairman has directed. And then, once y'all have received the final public comment, the board will then discuss the moratorium among yourselves, and then make a decision whether to enact the moratorium, and then also which geographic area that you want the moratorium to cover. But it cannot go outside of that dotted line, that radius. You have to stay within that dotted line. But within that radius, the board is free to craft whatever moratorium area that the board should make a decision to create.
So at the direction of the attorney, we will now close the local plan agency meeting. Board of County Commissioners will now re-adjourn.
Reconvene.
Do what?
Reconvene, Mr. Chairman.
Reconvene, I'm sorry. So we're opening back up for public comment again
Yes, sir.
on the same issue.
Yes, sir.
If you've already spoken and let your thoughts be known, then there's not really a whole lot of sense of rehashing that. If you have some additional comments, please come forward, state your name for the record.
I'm just asking you to consider the zoning. Was not aware of the entrance or anything like that. I'm just saying, please don't let the property be derelict all over and have zoning that will be put in place. That's what I'm asking.
Thank you for your comment. Public comment, please raise your hand, come forward, state your name for the record. Any other public comment? Please come forward. State your name for the record. Let your voice be heard. There being no further public comment, would you give direction to the board again now what you were saying earlier?
Well, Commissioner, you have two things to decide. One is, the first decision is, do you want to impose the moratorium? You can impose the moratorium as it was originally proposed, which is the 2,100-foot radius from the center line of the intersection of Gulf Beach Drive and Franklin Boulevard. That's that big dotted circular line that you see. At my request, I don't know how to work that thing. Within that circular radius, you can impose a lesser moratorium area. What I had proposed for your consideration, and it is certainly just for your consideration, you make the decision, would be the yellow highlighted area, which essentially is the area from 3rd Street to 3rd Street. It goes down from Bayshore to Pine, and from Pine over to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But as you can see, on the east and west sides of that Franklin Boulevard corridor, which is from 1st Street to 1st Street, all the way from Bayshore to the beach, which is what I'm referring to as the corridor. To the left and right of that, on the east and west, under this proposal for your consideration, those areas would be excluded from the moratorium area. What Mr. Theriak had suggested to you as another option for you to think of is if you wanted to take that yellow area that goes from 1st to 3rd Street, south of Pine down to the beach, which presently is not highlighted in yellow, you could include all of that area in the moratorium area. It really is a policy decision for the board to make. So those are the two decisions. Does the board favor adopting the 6-month moratorium so that you can plan and prepare an overlay district for your consideration? And then secondly, what is the geographic area that you want to impose the moratorium?
The pleasure of the board on this issue.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I share something? I would like to just make it publicly known that issues like this are no small matter to consider. There are a bunch of things involved. There are a bunch of people involved, businesses, different things. But one of the things I knew when I decided to run for this office was that there were going to be times of difficult decision-making. But I have to, as a person that has been elected to this office, represent everyone that elected me and all of us up here. And I think that that would best be served by a moratorium being in place. If the 6 months now don't work, what 6 months would be good for anybody? The future is happening, change is happening, and am I opposed to change? No. But I am opposed to change for the sake of change, just because we want it to be different. So as a commissioner of this district, I make a motion that we enact this moratorium, and then it be from 3rd Street to 3rd Street, because the issue brought up, and that several have touched on about brand, how you're going to leave parts of that business district out of that consideration. That's my motion.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question for clarification? Commissioner Jones, just so that I'm clear, because I'm going to be responsible
Yep.
for drafting this, from 3rd Street to 3rd Street, from the Apalachicola Bay all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, that would be the entire moratorium
Yes, sir.
corridor that you're
That's my.
That's your motion?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I was clear.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones. Do we have a second?
You doing the whole road?
Yes, sir. Well, the middle one? All right, there is, okay, Franklin, there's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street East. This is 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street West. What I'm understanding Commissioner Jones' motion to be is that that would be, 3rd Street would be the east boundary, 3rd Street West would be the west boundary. We would extend an imaginary line that would run north from the west boundary of 3rd Street West with Apalachicola Bay, follow along the boundary of the bay, the shoreline of the bay, to an imaginary line extended from the east side of East 3rd, following that south on that same imaginary line to the beach, and it went somewhere, and then along the beach back over to west, the west boundary of West 3rd. So that's what what's right there, West 3rd, here. That's what I understand the motion to be. Is that correct, Commissioner Jones?
Yes, that is correct.
See, I figured that out after. See.
So we do have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Massey.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Look at, I don't understand what you're making a motion, you made a second, but I still don't understand what's going on here. I mean, what's gonna happen during the moratorium? What the moratorium for?
Commissioner, we have yet to receive any specific directions from the board, so I will tell you generally the concept as I see moving forward, but that concept is subject to specific instructions to the board, or from the board to me, which is during that 6-month moratorium, there will be a planning process in place where your planning staff, in conjunction with your planning and zoning, will conduct a series of public hearings to create a proposed zoning overlay. So you're not changing necessarily, you're not doing away with your C2 and your C3 zoning on the island. You're talking about imposing an overlay which will impose additional requirements on how people want to see that center section of the island develop. That's what I think is going to happen during that 6-month period. Eventually, it will come back to you in the form of an ordinance for your consideration as a board, whether to adopt this St. George Island corridor overlay or not. But during that 6-month period, the purpose of the moratorium is to preserve the status quo so that you keep in place as is where is during that 6-month period, with the provision that people that need to pull repair permits, and they've got to change their roof, or I think the chairman said replace a set of steps. They can do all of those things. If they have to replace a damaged building that's damaged because of natural occurrences such as a storm or a fire, they'll be able to replace their existing structures. But otherwise, that moratorium area would be unchanged during that 6-month planning process. If we can't get it completed within that 6-month period, as we discussed earlier, it may be extended for a couple of months. I mean, we've got a 9-month moratorium in place right now for the medical marijuana regulations that the county staff is developing. So, I mean, it's not unheard of to have a 9-month moratorium in this county. We've even had 1-year moratoriums in the past that we extended for a 6-month period years ago. And that was on the condo-tel form of development. So that's what we will be doing during the 6-month period, and the staff will work in good faith to try and bring back to the board an ordinance within that 6-month period so the board doesn't have to consider extending the 6-month period.
Well, I still, all I'm trying to do is get straight of this right now. See, what I'm trying to do is get straight, because I heard people get up, they want to be involved with, who gonna be involved? Is it gonna be the staff or?
At this point, the county commission has not made a decision whether you want to form some sort of a citizens committee. My recommendation to you, since this issue is being brought up, is that you rely on your professional staff and your planning and zoning commission in conjunction with the conduct of public hearings so that they can receive input from the public. So my recommendation is that the county staff would be the lead agency, so to speak, controlling the development of these regulations, but clearly conducting public meetings, receiving public comment.
Okay, so it just be staff right now, and
That would be my recommendation, yes.
It hadn't been determined by the board.
But the board hasn't decided that.
So we,
Yeah.
but I was telling someone earlier when they said they wanted to be part of the committee, I've not heard anyone up here establish a committee yet. But now we're dealing with the moratorium. If that don't happen, we won't need no committee. So we gotta see where we're, first things first, in other words. First things first.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Commissioner Lockley, to try to answer your question the best that I can, in my knowledge and understanding, there's never really been a plan in place for St. George Island. There was some area designated to be a business district. It's just kind of been wide open. Okay, this is just an attempt to try to take the time to enact a plan, because we all know what it looks like today, but like the gentleman said earlier, what's it going to be 15, 20 years from now? You know, it's our job to make sure that we put in place the best plan possible, because we have kids and others behind us that are going to be taking over things. And if we just let it be what it be, then what's it going to be like 15, 20 years? There's only so much property there. It's not going to expand. It's only always going to be that amount of property. So this is just an attempt to provide the time for a plan to be put in place for that business district, is the way I understand it. That's what the motion's about anyway.
we got rules and we got regulations. Now, it's gonna be changes, like it changed now from what it was 30 years ago. Whatever we decide today, 30 years from now, it's gonna be no change. They gonna wanna push that one out and bring in another. I don't know. I mean, I'm not for no, I'm not for high rises. And I'm not for nobody telling people what to do with their property. I believe in property rights. And this one got a bunch of issues where you got people gonna be, if you do get a committee, you're gonna tell one owner that own a house to tell another owner, well, we don't want you to do this. But in the meantime, who to say, if we come back and say, okay, well, that fall, or we get up and say, I want every house on the island blue. I don't want them fussing at me behind me telling them their house got to be blue. So, you know,
Commissioner
I
Lockley,
don't want nobody telling me what, I don't own but a little piece of property. I don't want nobody telling me what I can do on it.
Commissioner Lockley, you do have somebody tell me what you're gonna do. You live in the city of Appalachia.
If I'm zoned for it, I'm not gonna do what I don't supposed to do. But, you know, if I could do it, I wanna be able to do it.
Commissioner, respectfully, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, we do already, as a county, and have been, telling people what they're gonna do with their property. We have zoning codes, and we have our comprehensive plan. It is not a new thing for government to be in place to tell people how property is gonna go and what's gonna go on there. That is nothing new. So this is not an attempt to tell everybody they're gonna have a blue house. And any discussion about committees is really, really preemptive or too early because we haven't established a moratorium yet. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, but I just agree to disagree with you, sir.
Any other comment from the board? I have one comment, and that is, I'm glad to see that the moratorium is going to extend from the bay to the Gulf. I think that's all-inclusive and not discriminatory in nature.
Right.
It's the total commercial area on the island. Other than that, I'm not gonna comment a whole lot, but to me, it looks better that way, and I think it functions better that way. You're not excluding anybody, it's all inclusive. So I do appreciate the motion being made in that fashion. No further comment. I'm gonna call for a vote on this issue. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed?
I oppose.
Let the record reflect Commissioner Lockley opposed. And that concludes our public hearing. The board will recess for 5 minutes.
Before you go, could we, I would recommend commissioners that go ahead, recess for lunch. We come back, restore report, myself, Attorney Schuler, and then after that, we go into the, you guys have a executive session, and after that, you have budget this afternoon. So now is the best time to recess for lunch.